Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing the 2017 end of year survey. So this survey is created by Jaime from Perpetual Page-Turner. She makes it every year. According to her website, this is the 8th year that she's done this. It's a list of about 30 questions related to your reading and then some more questions relating to like your blogging life. I'm gonna try and get through all of the book-related questions. Because there are so many questions in this survey, I'm not giving any synopses and I'm gonna try to keep my thoughts on the book very, very short. So the first 3 questions are statistics related. I did do a whole video on my reading stats from 2017, so feel free to check that out for more in-depth stats. The first question is the number of books that you read, and that was 47. The number of rereads, which was 5 out of that 47. The genre that you read the most from, and that was definitely fantasy. Best book that you read in 2017. My next video after this should be my best books of 2017, where I'll talk about a bunch of books that were my favorites. But for this question, I'm gonna pick just one, and if I had to pick just one, I would pick This Mortal Coil by Emily Suvada. I've done a book review on this, which I will link for you, but I really love this book for lots of reasons. It's a YA science fiction dystopian that is action-packed and full of twists and turns, and also has really good science in it. Book you were excited about and thought you were gonna love more, but didn't. And my answer to this is The Circle by Dave Eggers. There's so much hype surrounding The Circle, and I love dystopians, and the idea of the book sounded really fantastic to me, so I was really thinking that I was gonna love it, and I was very disappointed. I ended up giving it a 2 stars. Most surprising book in a good or bad way that you read. This was hard because I had a few surprises in a good way, but for this I'm going to go with The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. It was an arc that I had gotten from Y'all West last summer, and I tend to go into arcs with very low expectations. This one totally blew me away. I really loved it, and it's one of my favorites from last year. Book you pushed the most people to read, and they did. I don't have an answer for this because I don't know of any books that I specifically pushed people to read, or if anybody actually read them. If I convinced you to read a book last year, leave a comment and let me know because I have no idea. Best series starter, best sequel, and series ender of 2017. I started quite a few series, 13 to be exact, and a few of them were really good, but I would say my best series starter from last year would be The Demon King by Cinda Chima. It's the first book in the 7 Realms series. As far as the best sequel that I read last year, that's gotta be hands down The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. It's the 4th book in the Wheel of Time series. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about that series enough already, but out of all the sequels I read, that was definitely the one that brought me the most joy and was the most fun to read. It's my favorite in the series so far. And then best series ender. Sadly, I didn't like any of the series enders that I read last year. So I ended 3 series and they were all disappointing. I gave them all 3 stars. None of them were terrible, but they just did not live up to the rest of the series, the books that came before it. They were all disappointing, so I don't have a favorite series ender from 2017. In case you're wondering, the 3 series enders that I read: Fire Study by Maria V. Snyder, which was the last book in the Poison Study series, End of Days by Susan E., which is the last book in the Penryn and the End of Days series, and also Infinite by Jodi Meadows, which was the last book in the New Soul trilogy. Favorite new author you discovered? I discovered quite a few new favorite authors. I did a monthly recommendations video in December about my new favorite authors, but if I'm gonna have to pick one, I'm gonna say Cinda Chima, the author of the 7 Realms series. Best book from a genre you don't typically read or was out of your comfort zone. I didn't really read that many books that were out of my comfort zone, but my book club for work did pick out Disrupted by Dan Lyons for one of our book clubs, and it's a nonfiction sort of humor satire book. It's a little out of my comfort zone. It's not something that I would typically read, but I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really funny. The author, Dan Lyons, also writes for that show Silicon Valley, so that might give you a sense of what kind of humor is in there. Most action-packed, thrilling, unputdownable book of the year, and I'm sorry to say this book again, but that was definitely This Mortal Coil by Emily Suvada. It was so action-packed, so much drama, so much twists and turns. It was crazy. It was so fun. Definitely unputdownable. Book you read in 2017 that you're most likely to reread next year. Honestly, I don't really have an answer for this. I don't really reread all that often. I like the idea of rereading more than I actually reread. And most of the rereading that I have been doing has been to continue on in series. But I don't think there was anything that I actually read in 2017 that I'm gonna read again in 2018. Favorite cover? I think I'm gonna go with The Queen of the Tearling. I really liked the black and the gold, and I think it looks looks really cool. Most memorable character. I think for this answer, I'm gonna go with Raisa from the Seven Realms series by Cinda Chima. She is my kind of princess. She's like smart and funny and badass and always knows what she wants and what to do or how to go about getting what she wants. Most beautifully written book. For this, I'm gonna go with Uprooted by Naomi Novik. That book is really atmospheric and has some really beautiful writing in it. Most thought-provoking or life-changing book. I kind of struggled with this because I don't really read a lot of like philosophical books, I guess. But the answer that I came up with is Structuring Your Novel by K.M. Weiland. So this is a nonfiction book about the craft of writing that I read in October last year. Prior to reading this book, the idea of writing a book just seemed so like nebulous and impossible, like there was no way I could ever do it. This, along with another book called Outlining Your Novel that I also read by K.M. Weiland, kind of showed me that writing a book isn't necessarily something people can just naturally do, but that it's something that can be learned. And that book just really broke down the process of writing a book into like smaller pieces to really give me the confidence that I can learn how to do this and I will one day be able to do this. So in that sense, it was pretty life-changing. Book you can't believe you waited until 2017 to read. I think for this I'm gonna go with the Queen of the Tearling series because I have been hearing about the series since I joined BookTube, since I joined the blogging world. So I'd been hearing about it for a couple years now and I just never got around to reading it. Favorite passage or quote that you read? I don't really do that. I don't really like keep track of quotes or anything like that, so no answer for that. Shortest and longest book that you read? The shortest book that I read was, I think, Outlining Your Novel by K.M. Weiland, but the shortest fiction book that I read was Bird Box by Josh Malerman, and the longest book that I read was The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, which was around like 1,000 pages, which I actually listened to on audio, but it still counts. Okay, so my battery died, so I'm sorry if there was a bit of an angle change. Next question, book that shocked you the most? Again, I think I'm gonna have to go with this Mortal Coil by Emily Suvada. Like I said, that book has a lot of plot twists in it. OTP of the year, I'm gonna go with Raisa and Hans from the Seven Realms series. I love them together so much, and it's one of those relationships where they like want to be together, but they can't for different reasons. A little bit of like forbidden love, love that trope. Favorite non-romantic relationship of the year, I'm gonna go with the Wheel of Time series. I know I talk about it a lot, but in the Wheel of Time series, there's a group of teens that go on this adventure that are all childhood friends, and I really love all of their relationships with each other. So for those of you who have read it, I'm thinking of the three boys, Rand, Matt, and Perrin, and then also probably Egwene. I consider her in that group as well. And there's so many more friendships in that series, but those are like the main ones. Favorite book you read from an author that you've read previously? I'm gonna go with any of the Robert Jordan books, so any of the Wheel of Time books that I read last year, such as The Shadow Rising. Best book you read based solely on a recommendation from somebody else or peer pressure. So for that, I'm gonna go with I Believe in a Thing Called Love by Maureen. I hadn't heard about this book at all. I went to the preview event for Y'all West. Some of my friends that I was meeting there were really excited about this book. You guys know me, I don't really read contemporary, but the friends that I was with were really excited about it. So I picked up an art copy while I was there, and while it wasn't one of my all-time favorites, I really enjoyed myself reading that book. 22, newest fictional crush. I hate to reuse this answer, but I'm gonna go with Hans Alistair from the Seven Realms series because he is like my type of man. He's a little bit of a bad boy, but is smart and funny and practical, and yeah, I have a huge crush on him. Best debut that you read? I'm gonna go with this Mortal Coil. It was like my favorite book, so how can I not say that? Because it was a debut. Best world building, most vivid setting? This is hard because it kind of depends on what you mean by world building. I think my go-to answer for this would be any of the Wheel of Time books that I read because that setting is very vivid for me, but that probably has to do with the fact that I've read the beginning of the series multiple times and I know this world really well. So I'm not gonna say that answer. Instead, I'm gonna go with the Queen of the Tearling series because the world in that series is really interesting to me. Primarily a fantasy setting that has like a medieval feel to it, but it's also got a sci-fi aspect to it because it's a regressed society in our future. That's definitely a really unique setting. Book that put a smile on your face or was the most fun to read. I would say that this Mortal Coil was probably the most fun to read just because it was so action-packed and like twisty-turny, but it definitely didn't put a smile on my face. Like there was nothing funny about it. I do remember laughing a lot when I was reading An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I don't think it's really meant to be like a super funny book, but there were a few lines in it that definitely made me laugh. There was this one line that I read out to my husband because I just thought it was so funny. He didn't think it was quite as funny many as I did, but there were definitely parts of that book that made me laugh out loud. So I'm gonna say that book. Book that made you cry or nearly cry. For this, I'm definitely going with Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. I bawled when I read that book. I was like on a work trip. I remember sitting in my hotel room, eating some takeout, and just like crying while I listened to this book. It was so good and definitely emotional. Hidden gem of the year. I was trying to find a book that I feel like not a lot of people talk about that I really enjoyed. Part of me wants to, of course, say this Mortal Coil because I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about it and it's not getting much buzz, but I loved it so much. But in the spirit of giving a different answer, I think I'm gonna go with The Troop by Nick Cutter because until I read it, I literally had never heard of it. I picked it up because Shannon from Bookerly was talking about it and I thought it sounded really good. But before hearing her talk about it, I hadn't ever heard of Nick Cutter. I hadn't heard of The Troop, and it is one of my favorite books from last year. It's a horror book. I definitely don't recommend it if you're not into horror. Book that crushed your soul. And I don't think I have an answer for this. I mean, I think the closest books were probably the two Ruta Sepetys books that I read, so Between Shades of Grey and Salt to the Sea. Those were both very emotional and heartbreaking, but at the same time, she's able to end things on a somewhat of a hopeful note, so they weren't quite as like soul-crushing as books can be. It's the most unique book that you read. And I struggled with this one a little bit, mostly because I was trying to come up with an answer that I haven't already said in this video, which was kind of hard, and I didn't succeed. So I'm gonna say, on the one hand, this Mortal Coil, because I thought the genetics and the programming combination and the type of virus outbreak that Emily Suvada created were just unique and amazing to me. So there's that answer, but I'm gonna give another one. I'm also gonna say The Queen of the Tearling, mostly because of the world building, like I already mentioned. It's a really weird book to describe. It's kind of fantasy, but it's kind of like science fiction dystopian, but it's got magic in it, but it's historical, and it's like a bunch of different things mixed together, and I really loved that. Book that made you the most mad. And for this, I'm actually going to talk about a book that I DNF'd. So I attempted to read The Girl in Times Square by Paulina Simons. I read a good chunk of that book, about 60% of it, which was a little over 300 pages, before deciding to DNF it. That book made me really mad. I don't want to get into details because this video is already really long and I'm going to post a rant about this book, so when I do, I will be sure to link it. But what I will say is that there was something that was treated as a plot twist in this book. I mean, it shouldn't be a plot twist, one, because of what it is, but two, because it happens at like 25% in. But if you read the synopsis, they don't tell you what it is, they just tell you that something terrible happens to her. That book in general just kind of made me angry. Okay guys, we did it! Those were all 30 questions that were book related in the 2017 reading survey. I wanted to do this video because it gave me the chance to talk about some books that I wouldn't talk about in my favorites or least favorites of the year. If you've read any of these books, or if you want to share any of your answers to these questions with me, be sure to leave those down in the comment section. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I post bookish videos at least once a week. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye. That out for like more in-depth statistics, for more in-depth stats. But the answer that I came up with, the shortest fiction book that everyone thought it, and this one's hard. Bye.